Welcome to From the Ashes, the Dungeon Crawler Network podcast all about Ashes of Creation by Intrepid Studios. Bear witness to the rebirth of the MMORPG genre from the ashes of an industry that has left the gamers behind. I am your host and founder of the Dungeon Crawler Network, Aggelos, and with me once again, the wonderful co-founder, Thais. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. How are you?
Awesome. It's been a few weeks since you and I got to sit down and do our more chill, relaxed Pillars of Creation segments. So it's nice to have you back again.
Good to be back. Thank you.
For those of you who might just be tuning in, this show is broken down into multiple segments that we do from time to time, little bits that we do from episode to episode. Some episodes will have multiple, some will not. Obviously, as the game gets close to launch or at launch, the show will start to expand and start including more and more segments because obviously there'll be more and more things to talk about. This being pre-alpha, and I guess pre-alpha is a good term for it. Very early on in development, we've been moving into like one or two segments at most, but that will start to expand. This particular segment, the Pillars of Creation, is where I kind of sit down with the one, the only Thais herself, and we kind of have a Good Morning America style show where we just kind of sit down and chat about whatever it is we want to talk about, as long as it's related to Ashes of Creation. So, yeah. Then we got to move on and do this show. But before I do so, I have a couple of little announcements I have to do right off the top of this. First off, I got to give a special shout out to our newest Patreon supporter. Why did I lose the name? Where is the name? I had it in here and now I'm lost. This is not good for a show. Monaco, there it is. Found it. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. My notes are all over the place. So, Monica, thank you so much for supporting us over at patreon.com/Dungeon Crawler Network. Support over there gets you all of our episodes at least a day early, as well as you get to be entered into our monthly giveaway, where we give away all sorts of stuff, whether it be DCN swag, game keys, all those fun things. And, of course, you get to help support these podcasts and what we do. So, we very much appreciate it. The second thing is that if you listen to episode 20, we have officially opened up recruitment for the Ashes of Creation wing of the Dungeon Crawler Network. So you can check the description of this podcast, whether you're listening to us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play, or YouTube itself, and you'll be able to see a link that will take you over to our website, dungeoncrawlernetwork.com, and you can fill out a guild application and join our already established gaming community. That'd be awesome. All right, so for Pillars of Creation, obviously there was a live stream on September 15th, and there was a couple interesting things that were brought in. First off, we got to see a little bit of the gameplay that was, a mix of the PAX experience. So if you've followed pretty much our last 3 or 4 episodes where we talked about PAX almost exclusively, this wouldn't be anything new to you. But this time it was the developers playing, and I'm going to get Thais's reactions to that because she didn't get to follow PAX as closely. So this is something that I finally made her sit down and say, watch this. And so she got a chance to sit down, watch all of that. And I'd like to hear her unfiltered responses to it. But we also got some interesting details about Alpha Zero, which is the first public alpha that is going to be coming out for Ashes of Creation. So that'll be the very first one. It will obviously be under NDA and will be for anyone who has won one of the alpha keys from signing up over at ashesofcreation.com. So that's pretty cool. All right. Thais, the video that you watched, now that was obviously the gameplay that they showed off at PAX. That was what people could play. It was the PvE demo of what people could play over at PAX West. All right, so we had a lot of people in there, but this time it was all the developers playing it, and they had some fun talking back and forth. And I think they even threw a little bit of lore in there about one of the Shadeborn, which were those airborne race that you got to see, which were corrupted by whatever it is that's corrupting the world, which we still don't know much about yet. So what were your initial thoughts?
All right, well, as I was watching the video, I wrote down a whole bunch of notes because I was really interested in it, and there were a bunch of things that were really cool. And let's see, where did it start for me? Okay, the first thing that I picked up on that I really liked was that they're going to try and implement resources into the world that make them feel real. And one of the main things that they said was that there's going to be no sparkles. You actually have to find the resources that you want. And I thought that that was really interesting. And it's certainly going to make it much more difficult to gather.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I think it had to be an episode with you, I believe. We talked about the idea of the Fanglers. Remember one of the very first videos they showed us where they were talking about the danger of the world, and you had the Fangler hiding in the water, and then it popped up, you know, like one of those little anglerfish, and it jumped out of the water and attacked. And during one of their initial videos, they were referring to it as, you know, the world will be dangerous and stuff like that. They want it to be scary. And we talked about it being like, hey, the only way this is going to work is if they hide nameplates and stuff like that, because as a player, I'm not going to be confused when I look at a flower and I see a name and then I see Fangler or something like that. Like, you're not going to see it. I'm like, they would have to hide the nameplates or make it in a way that the health bars and stuff are hidden until such a time as it attacks. The fact that there's no sparklies, as you say, to denote that there was something that is indeed harvestable, they could very well hide those hidden monsters and stuff within the vegetation, because as you pointed out, they have that little reticule that moves around that you can select. If you just so happen to hit where one of those booby traps are, it'll attack you. Kind of reminds me of Final Fantasy XIV, which I know you play, the Mimics, where it looks like a treasure chest, but you don't actually know until you click on it, and then it attacks.
Oh, I thought it was a Diglett popping out of the ground and attacking you as you're harvesting mushrooms when you were talking about that.
Confirmed Pokemon crossover.
I'd play it. I could get into that. And it actually wasn't me who said no sparkles. It was actually Steven who said no sparkles, no sparklies. That was him who said that. That's what I wrote down, no sparkles. And I like that idea. I do. It's going to make it real competitive to get resources, because you have to search for things that you want, and because they're going to make them more naturally occurring as they would be in the real world, you're going to have to search the dank places for the mushrooms and the mountains for the ore, and I really like that. I liked it a lot. And I did like the reticule, the marking on the ground, because as I started talking about how they're going to be more natural, no sparkles, my first thought went to, well, then how are you going to harvest such things? And then, bam, the circle came out. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. You know, I really like that. And then after that, they were talking about the little development that they were in, and they were talking about how it was level 2. And I was having mixed reactions about that, because there's only 5 levels, right? If I remember correctly.
5 or 6, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. And I believe they were saying, you know, level 1 is just some random NPCs, and level 2 is like the settlement, level 3 is the village. And I wish they would show like just pictures of 1, 2, 3, 4, because I'm curious to see size, because level 2 already looked so well established, I guess.
Well, and I actually just thought of it. You know, you have your outpost, which is just the standard people. You have your settlement, which is the small portion, a town, and then town, city, and then town, village, city, metropolis. I think that's how it goes. They've showed us the metropolis already, or at least their concepts. Yeah, mm-hmm. And you can see how large the metropolis is. And I believe in one of their very first node videos, they kind of showed it going up to the town or village stage. I don't remember what they call it. I think it's town. But there's obviously, it starts off as like a tent, you know, and a few people, like a campfire. And then it becomes a small village. Or settlement, and it will grow from there. I can imagine something similar to like Witcher 3, because whenever you walked out to Witcher 3 and saw their hamlets, which consisted of like a well and like 3 buildings, that was a hamlet or a farmstead or something like that. And then you got out to something like Novigrad or something like, you know, one of the bigger cities, and you're like, wow, this is huge comparatively. So yeah, you're right. They've not really shown us concepts of much other than the concept of what a metropolis will look like, which is very large, and that makes me very happy. And
Me too.
yeah, and what is considered the town or or village or the third ranking, which we've seen a little bit of. So yes, there's a gap between what considered a city, which is right below metropolis. It's we don't know any of that yet, but I'm curious as well.
Because the video did, because they were running around and then they came back and it had leveled while they were doing whatever they were doing, and the difference was significant, and I was very impressed with that. And then they started talking about the differences between what happens in level 2 and then the differences what happens with level 3, and I was so happy to hear that when it grows, there's all kinds of, which you knew was going to happen, but it was still wonderful seeing the developers tell you. When it upgrades, there's new quests and new merchants are walking around the city and upgraded crafting zones, and it was just all awesome to see in play, because these are all things that you really only hear. And then as they were walking through, they collected their first quest, which was something simple. I was really happy about that. The one thing that I took note to, which is just something really, really small, is on the right side of the HUD when it had the quest outlined. I liked how when they completed something that was just a simple strike through. Mm-hmm. It's something so simple, but something that I actually enjoyed seeing. And then,
is there a particular reason why? Like, because obviously, a lot of the complaints have been about the UI, and it's very early, and I know they said somewhere in there where the UI was in terms of their development. It's just pretty much just bare bones to get you in there, and their UI does need quite a bit of work, because that's what most people see right off the bat. That's how you interact with the world. It has to be really good, or at least provide a lot of customization, because how many times, hello cat, hello, yeah, she's on every show. There you go. For the people who like my cat, there she was, and now she has to go away. But the UI needs to. How many MMOs that allow for add-ons, such as World of Warcraft and stuff, don't even just have little add-ons; they have whole revamps of the UI in general. And I know they mentioned that, at least at this early stage, that add-ons are going to be something that, I don't want to say isn't supported, but they're still kind of on the fence about what is going to be supported overall, because they don't like the idea of manipulating the game that much. So that may be here nor there. So we'll have to check on that. But why just the strike through?
I'm not sure. I guess because it's something that's really clean, that shows that you completed an objective, but that the objective is still on the screen. Because for some reason, it's escaping me, and I always go to Final Fantasy XIV because it's what I'm playing at the moment, but when you complete something, it disappears and it's replaced by something else. Now, if you're in a really long quest, obviously that's a smart decision, so you know exactly where you are and what you've completed, but it was just something clean, something easy. It still showed you the quest objectives, what you've completed. I just liked it, just something small that I liked.
Okay.
That's all. Yeah. And then, I'll check my notes here real quick. Oh, I did take note to the fact that movement looks clunky. But in my notes, I even put movement looks clunky, but ... alpha. So it's a complaint, but obviously it's going to get better. The way that the characters kind of twisted when they were walking, when they were side strafing, to me, it seemed a little just, unusual, but it's really early. It's bound to get better. And one thing when I was watching the video that I had to laugh at and I had to love, and all the developers were laughing at it too, was when the physics decided to break and the caravan just toppled on its side, and the horses are still going, the caravan's just being pulled on its side. It was good to see that there were working physics this early, though, that could mess up and horses were still going. So I did enjoy that. And let's see, they were also fighting something. I think you had mentioned it earlier. I can't remember. And they were talking about lore when I was watching it. And I wrote in all caps, mage, yes, because the combat looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. And I was watching the casting bar, and I think Steven kept missing the red mark, and I was laughing.
You're getting a little bit of echo that I can hear. I'm not really sure where that's coming from, but it sounds like you're getting a little bit of reverb. Can you pull your mic away from your PC just a little bit or push the PC back a bit?
Is that better?
I think so. It might just be
Maybe.
the room you're in. But yeah. Okay, continue.
I will probably definitely play a cleric, but as I was watching the mage, shoot icicles and putting a reticle down and fire exploding, and Stephen was like running around and chasing the enemies, and I was so excited because it looked so much fun and it looked so cool, and I really wasn't able to pay attention to much of the other classes because I was so focused on watching the mage play. But the one thing that I did see was a wall. When the wall came up and the mob could not get past it, I thought that was really neat. It was kind of shiny and yellow, and it was pretty cool. And then as they were walking into the cave, and I know you and I discussed before how we weren't sure how the utility skills were going to work, especially when it came to the cleric and dissipating, debuffs and things like that. But when they got to the entrance of the cave and there was, poison filling it, and they were discussing how to get past it, and all of a sudden the cleric did something and it just went whoosh and disappeared. I was like, oh my God. I was really impressed and happy to see how that would work. And I think what happened before that is when they decided to bring the tracking out to play because they got lost on where their caravan went. And again, I was impressed and I was excited because it's not often anymore where you see a game, especially an MMO, where you get lost. In WoW, they have the quest tracker that tells you exactly where to go. And in WildStar, you click on a quest and it just points you in the direction you have to go. And Final Fantasy, you click on the quest, it shows you on the map. So this was...
Games like Black Desert, I think, even have a line that you follow. And you can even auto path to it, I believe. So that's something that more modern games do.
The auto pathing kills me. It absolutely kills me. So the fact that they had to activate their tracking ability to find it was just exciting. And I know before I talked bad about the utility skills, but I think I might actually be jumping on that bandwagon. I think I might be there. The only complaint I have about that is when the tracking was on the ground, it was very bright, very wide. I feel like they could make it smaller, so you kind of have to look for it a little more, maybe.
Okay.
Make it a little bit harder to see so that you're still trying to put an effort into following your tracking, maybe. Mm-hmm. That's the one thought that I had about it. And then my other side here, maybe, really happy. There was a small cutscene before the boss battle in the cave. You see, I'm just like crawling down the crystal wall, and I was like, oh my gosh, boss! I was cheering them on while making dinner. So that was awesome that happened. Oh my gosh, and they were talking about during the battle about how there aren't going to be any indications on the ground that something is happening, that you have to move or you have to pay attention to the animation of the monster that you're fighting to get clues as to what they're going to do so you can move. And I like how one of the developers was picking on another one because he was getting hit by everything and he finally dodged, and they were like, yeah, you saw that. It's going to be really hard for me. I tend to pay attention to the ground and the players a lot when I heal, so I tend to get hit a lot.
Well,
so
here's a
that'll be fun
question for
me.
you at that point. With the idea of telegraphing, that's easy enough to see. Like, we see that in a lot of older games, but the modern MMO tends to like to highlight circles and stuff like that, specifically for computers that don't quite have the graphical fidelity that others do. How do you think they're going to do ground effects? I mean, outside of the thing I'm thinking of, I've obviously been playing Guild Wars 2 a lot recently, and I remember doing one of these things where the boss will actually pull things down from the roof, and of course they do the big orange circles as per normal of most things. But I mean, you could see the animation, wherein you could see like dust and stuff falling from the roof and small pebbles and things like that. Do you think that not having those things is going to hamper the game in any way?
No, I think people are just going to have to pay attention a little harder for clues to your surroundings to make sure that you know what's happening. I really do. Because if they're saying that you have to watch the boss to see is he spinning in a circle and that's when he's going to do a tail swipe, unless you mean things like are people going to have difficulty seeing a shockwave on the ground? Like if he doesn't move, the ground's moving. I don't know. I really don't, because I guess because you and I see perfectly fine.
Well,
I mean, yeah, but
I wouldn't go that far. I got glasses on, but
the only people I could see having an issue would be people who are colorblind, but then games add colorblind modes.
Well, colorblind modes really only help in certain situations by setting colors, various colors as being dynamically opposed to one another, so they stick out, But the big issue that I'm seeing, and it will be something that you'll do at the engine, obviously Unreal is gorgeous, right? But you do need some sort of a pretty powerful rig in order to actually run anything that's run on Unreal. And I specifically noticed from some other games, like if I'm playing Guild Wars 2 on the laptop that you're on right now, for instance, I cannot see little dust effects on the ground, like just because I have to lower the graphical fidelity low enough that I can actually play the game. And I can still play fine, but I couldn't see those things without the red circle on the ground because everything just kind of blends into this, fuzzy pixelated mess. I'm curious how they are going to be able to telegraph, like you said, ground moves are AoE moves. Like I said, when rocks are falling from the ceiling and they're landing all around, without those big red circles to telegraph where the area is, how are they going to show that? And that's actually going to be something I'm really interested in seeing. Otherwise, I feel like players will start to complain that are even treated as unresistible damage, something that, you just hope your RNG is good and you didn't get hit, right?
I feel like if that's the case, people are going to have to play with a level of anticipation that things are going to happen and to get ready to move. They're also going to have to pay attention to their teammates. If a teammate near you moved, then you need to move.
Well, I get it for 100% scripted things. And obviously these are going to be scripted, but there's still going to be a level of random that's in there. Like, even when the ceiling's falling, yeah, in certain fights, like in particular the boss that they were fighting, when it did a frontal cone, it's really easy to know where the frontal cone is. Obviously, we all know what a frontal cone is. You can easily pinpoint the origin, put it at the mouth, and go out. Got it. But if it's I am pulling a Samson here and I'm making the house fall down on top of you, the rocks are going to fall at various areas, various positions. And just because one person moved doesn't necessarily mean that, you can follow them, or maybe you can if you make it, maybe you'll run right through it because they were just split second at that time if your graphical settings aren't good enough. And that's where the red circles made it easy that if you were running on minimum specs, because I can tell you right now, games like ESO look completely different on minimum versus ultra. Not just cleaner, like they just look different. So you're going to have that spectrum of machines that are going to be playing this, and they need to find out a way to telegraph AoE moves without the use of red circles. That's the argument I'm trying to make.
Well, I feel like people are going to have to strafe in circles while praying to RNGesus to make sure they avoid everything and just hope for the best, because sometimes that's what you have to do. Well,
I don't necessarily agree with that, because that's also then going to cause issues with the people with the good machines are going to go, sorry, Thais, you can't come with us. You don't have a GeForce 1080 in SLI, so you're not coming along. That's can be an issue.
Ultimately, I'm glad the red circles aren't there, because they're already making it so that there's real life depth, so to speak, with so many different things that they're doing. Putting red circles would just be an awful idea. So the fact that they're taking those away is going to make the game that much more interesting, that much more difficult. You're going to have to pay attention that much harder to make sure you know what the boss is going to do. And you're going to have to know the boss very well. So I'm also curious how they're going to be able to get around that, because there are going to be lots of different people playing. And I don't know. I don't know how they would be able to work that. I don't know. Well, that is... Oh, the last thing that I had was I liked that the boss filled up the area with smoke, and then you weren't really able to see anything. And then I wrote "nice" behind that. But that's the end of my notes. That's everything that I had.
Perfect. And that kind of leads us right into the next bit of discussion, which was the Alpha Zero details that have been released. Alpha Zero, which has I'm still gonna say tentative start date. Because if you follow MMO development, that is something that is fluid. I like that he gave us a very firm start date, but you never know. If there could be some issues, it could be longer. Who knows? We'll see. But the tentative start date is December 15th, 2017 for Alpha Zero, which will be the first alpha that the majority of players are going to be able to see. If you did not attend PAX or you're not in friends and family, that kind of stuff, or any of those very close builds, this is going to be the first one that a lot of people are going to get into. And when I say a lot of people, I think the last time I heard a projection, it was not that much. But regardless, Alpha Zero will be the first public alpha. Now, the couple things that I thought was interesting that they brought into this, and some of it I don't know. It doesn't make sense for me now, because I don't know how large it is in terms of digital space versus real life. So first off, when they talk about environment, we're going to see a lot of familiar places. It's going to be an extension of the PAX demo. If you listen to episode, I think it was 18 or 19 of the show, I'm trying to remember right now, we had a interview with Steven, and obviously it was from the PAX floor, so it was janky at best, only because anytime you record anything from PAX, it's loud and very difficult. But we had some interesting info, and we did talk about Alpha Zero because that was when we got the announcement, and they were saying that they're going to be expanding upon what they already have now, and was going to be what was seen at PAX, but they're quote unquote unlocking the doors, so making it less of a point A to point B, whatever. They plan on adding 3 different environments: a forest, a floodplain, and a desert. And there's going to be 3 nodes, each capable of reaching the village stage, which I guess would be tier 3. So that's kind of neat for the very first time. I mean, obviously, Alpha Zero is going to be dealing a lot with making sure that they have the network infrastructure in place, because obviously that is something that has been a big complaint, or not a big complaint, a big concern, because you can't really say it's a complaint because no one's actually seen it, but the net code from Unreal 4 has been brought up multiple times by multiple people, because Unreal doesn't necessarily have the best netcode, but it being very open, and Intrepid knowing that netcode is probably not good, they're probably working on something in-house, which they had mentioned before that they will be using for their network code. So 3 nodes and kind of stuff we've seen before. Thais, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, 3 nodes getting up the village stage? I'm curious.
I'm curious how many people are going to take part in this, because how long is it going to take to develop the nodes? What options are they going to give us to be able to accomplish these goals? Because this early, allowing us to go up to level 3, that's a pretty big deal. I could see 2 being easy to do, but 3, I wonder how many quests they're going to give us, and I'm really interested to see their forest, because when you make a forest, I visualize a lot of clutter: canopies, trees, brush, critters, that's what I think of when I think forest. So I'm really interested to see how they're going to pull that off, especially what it's going to look like this early. Because if it looks good early, it's going to look amazing much later.
And I've been very spoiled by forest recently in games such as Guild Wars 2 and playing Heart of Thorns with the jungle. You know, like, that's a forest. And
that's a lot of clutter.
Oh my goodness, is it a lot of clutter? Yeah.
But it looks real. It looks alive. You know, and this game is going to take it even further with how real. So I hope it looks pretty. Even early, I hope it looks pretty.
Right. The next little bit they mentioned is that they're going with a 4 kilometer by 4 kilometer area. I think kilometer is the right one anyway. And each node will accomplish possibly about 1/3 of the total area that presented. Now, this is the part that I guess I'm a little not concerned about, but the translation isn't there for me. And there goes the cat again. Because I know how far that is in real world distance, but how far is that actually going to be in a virtual type world? And that also kind of leads me to the whole world size in general, which is a whole other argument, because then you're asking yourself, they mention about all these politics and things like that can happen within Ashes of Creation, but a lot of this for like node size and caravans will really be dependent upon how large the world actually is. Because if it's something like Tamriel in ESO, I can walk from, one zone to the other, like in one alliance anyway, in probably less than 30 minutes. Even World of Warcraft, which had one of the larger open, you can walk from the very tip of Kalimdor all the way down to the very bottom of like Tanaris in probably an hour and a half. Just walking, or maybe even a low mount or something like that. So that was one of the bigger games I know. So I'm just curious how big this world's planning on being, right? And obviously, go ahead.
What comes to mind for me when I think of world size is The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, and how big their world was, and how hard it was to traverse from one side to the other. Because you had to do different modes. You had to soar and climb and swim and all these different things. And if they're inputting caravans across the land, you're thinking bridges, going around mountains, going through caves, trying to find ways across water. So even if it isn't as vast as we want, it could still take a crazy amount of time when you factor in anything that could get in your way.
Right. And I like that you said that, but I take umbrage with just the fact that you say the size that we want. I think there's a size that we need for the type of game that this is supposed to be. Sorry, precision of language. You yell at me all the time.
That I do. And a game like this, with what they want, with what we want, we're expecting, what we're thinking of, this game needs to be gigantic. The world needs to be huge. It really does.
And games like, I'm trying to think of another indie title that has, and I haven't seen proof of it, obviously, but Chronicles of Illyria has mentioned that their world size, like they gave us the amount of size that it would be, and it's fairly substantial to the point where they said in order to walk from one side of the continent to the other, it took like 4 or 5 hours. Yeah, and that was just from one side to the other of the continent.
Do you happen to know how long it is to walk from one side of Skyrim to the other?
Less than an hour. I mean, if you have a horse, it'll go a lot faster, but I mean, seriously, probably less than an hour. So, yeah, I mean, there are those types of things, but the world has to be there. So next up, we're going to see an early look at the Empyrean starting out area. If you're curious what the Empyrean are, if you're just joining us, obviously, from our community, Empyrean is one of the sub-races of the elves. The more, I think I attribute them to the high elves in Elder Scrolls lore, maybe not yellow, but, the more noble. Or if you want to look at Middle Earth, they are more the Noldor than the Sindarian elves, the wood elves. So there you go. And the idea they brought this up was the game that the Alpha Zero is going to essentially be what the game is, but shrunk down to like a smaller area, and everything will be kind of early in Alpha. So they want to have different storylines available depending on what nodes are leveled, which again works with what the game's supposed to be, because the nodes are supposed to, shut off quests and stuff or activate ones based on what actually gets leveled up. 2 of the 4 divine gateways will be present, which will allow players to arrive via the portal and decide where to go questing from there. And 3 distinct dungeons will be present. They will be open world, instance content to come later. And I'm actually glad they mentioned that, and I'll hit that up in a second. I'm just trying to hit up all of our bullet points here. Monsters will spawn differently based on what node is developed. All right, let's hit up these things. First off, the fact that instance content will come later. This was something that I personally feel is important for boss design, because I love the idea of open world dungeons, very similar to things like Darkness Falls and Dark Age of Camelot was one of my favorites. Now that was a PvP area, but obviously PvP can happen. And I love that idea, but I believe that bosses and certain encounters need to be instant, so you can't cheese them by bringing 100 people in, right? Because then at a certain point, I know or games have claimed that eventually you can, our bosses scale based on the amount of people that are here, so it'll be more difficult if you bring more people. Well, a lot of times that scale is just health pool. Like, they haven't figured out a way of making it so that it actually is, adding new abilities. All of a sudden a guy gets AoE if you bring in 20 people. Like those things I've not seen them do yet. And I highly doubt Intrepid is going to do this. I would really be surprised. What are your thoughts?
Well, I honestly don't have much to say on this, because I've never played a game that had open world dungeons in how I picture it in my head. But when I picture open world bosses, I picture the dragons in Guild Wars 2, or the swamp, the God's Lost Swamp. That's what I picture. And even when there's a lot of people, it still dies relatively quickly. What they could do, though, is they could put a cap, kind of like how they do in Guild Wars 2. If there's so many people in that particular zone, they have to funnel them to another zone. And then that would ensure that no one can, cheese the boss, so to speak, if that's a concern, which it would be. It's a valid concern.
Yeah, but I mean, based on the server tech that they want to have, are you saying that we would be? No, I'm thinking like, what is the max size that they mentioned 40-man rating and possibly taking like 2 groups, like 80-man rating is what I'm thinking at this point. But even 80 people, that's a lot of people, right? But much more than that, no one's going to create an instance for 80 people. I'd really be surprised if they did.
How about phasing?
Again, the phasing technology literally is just creating like a layer on a layer. Like you're putting people into like from the back end side of thing. A phasing is you're being placed on another server. You're technically and logically on a different logical segment of the server. So that still takes the extra resources, because you're running your own copy of the server at that point.
See, that idea, I would much prefer a fully instanced dungeon, because at least no one can mess with it, no one can bring too many people. It's your dungeon alone that you have to try and conquer with your team. Like, Joe Schmo can't just walk up with his, wood stick and pretend to be part of your team.
I agree only with bosses, because I love the idea of, the bringing in some shows and stuff like that. Some of the what is the genre called? Light RPGs. I've been reading some books and stuff like that about, like the idea of people living in MMOs and stuff like that. And the idea of having to fight your way into a dungeon because other players could kill you is something I really like. And that level of danger is something that I personally find interesting. Or the idea of having to get your guildies to guard the entrance to the boss while you're making attempts so that, if you die or wipe or whatever and you have to make your way back, that another guild can't go in and steal your kills. Like you could, like I could imagine world firsting, if world firsting is something that happens, to be not only a PvE experience, but a PvP one as well. Like having your entire guild there trying to prevent other guilds from getting their teams inside the dungeon. Oh, that's gonna be amazing. No,
not for me. Not for me. But I don't really like attacking other players. I don't want other players to impede my progress when I'm trying to play a game, because that to me would just make me angry.
And this is actually going to be a future topic for something we wanted to talk about, because obviously Ashes of Creation is going with a factionless game, so there's no real factions, but there is open world PvP. Now there are consequences involved in PvP, but it's going to be a future topic, because I know it's polarizing, even within our own community, of people going, what really kind of turns me off of Ashes of Creation is the fact that I don't have a safe place to PvE if I want. It could happen at any time. I don't like that. Some people, like me, love it, but I know I'm in a minority, not majority. You guys are in the majority.
I don't think I knew that exactly until this moment, and now I'm kind of really turned off.
See? Yeah, like it is a polarizing thing, but this game very much reminds me of Ultima Online, where there was a karma system. People could kill you. You could be out questing or picking flowers, and someone could come up and stab you in the face.
Unless there are some serious consequences, that's not going to deter anybody, because everybody, and yes, I'm going to say most everybody, wants to screw over everybody else. So,
I mean, the game is kind of built like that, though. I mean, that's one of the things that's most exciting, because when there's not a chance of loss, there's not really the same amount of excitement. But I do agree. Like, the penalty has to be steep enough that it would deter most people from doing it. There is always going to be certain, level of people who enjoy that type of thing anyway, but
now I know why you were having the serious discussion about people being blacklisted at certain points because of doing certain actions. Now it finally makes sense, because before I didn't understand that, and now I do. And now I can really see why things like that would be needed, because if you're rampaging across the zone, killing everybody, oh yeah, that's a clear indication that you were just a terrible human being, and you should not be able to group with anybody except they're like you.
Right. And that actually creates that, why am I drawing a blank? What's that one anime about being stuck in an MMO?
Sword Art Online.
Yeah. What about the bandit and thieves guild, or bandit and player killer guilds, murder guilds and stuff like that? Those things don't exist unless there are these systems. Like the idea of, he described it in the show, and one of the things that I like most about it is because it literally came from Ultima Online, which was the idea of if you do something bad to a player, you become a criminal, you're orange. That is what happened. Well, I think you went gray, and no, gray was neutral. It might have been orange. Red was the player killer, right? Those types of things can't happen if open world with the karma system is not in place. We'll have to get on this topic. I know we're running out of time. We still have to hit our mailbag. So the last couple of things I'm going to hit pretty quick. In terms of character customization and progression, they're going to have the 4 classes that were originally available in packs: Tank, Cleric, Mage, and Ranger. 2 races will be available, which are the Kalar humans and the Empyrean elves. So we'll actually get to see the elven models come into play. Character look presets for both male and female, so there's not going to be a full customization part yet, but will be added later. Loot drops will be in and change based on what node is most developed. Interesting. Ability to buy skills with a skill tree progression and level them up to about rank 10. So that's interesting. Crafting and gathering will be in, but be a very small aspect. I think they mentioned baby crafting. And obviously, the initial Alpha Zero goals are validating that the tech performance is up to expectations, and initial implementation of key system for players to test and help develop future iterations. Because once Alpha 1 hits, which is the first Kickstarter alpha, I believe at that point, no NDA will be there. Alpha 0 is under NDA. I believe Alpha 1 is not under NDA. Now, this might be changed. Don't take it as, absolute truth, because I seem to remember they say that Alpha 1 is not under NDA. And at that point, obviously, we're still alpha, but people will be streaming it. People will be talking about it. People will be doing all sorts of manner of things. So they need to make sure tech and stuff is up to expectations at that point. So Alpha 0 is something that could stretch for longer if they run into tech performance. So anything off of this, Thais, like that you would have thought of?
Oh, no, I'm still reeling over how I'm going to have to get applications for bodyguards. So, yeah, that's now open. You can now apply to be a bodyguard for these.
There you go. Put it in the comment in our guild application that you want to be Thais' bodyguard. But yeah, we will definitely be talking PvP in a future episode, because this is something that I think is really fascinating, because even within our own community, which is fairly large, we've got several hundred people in our community, and it goes back and forth. Some of us who were from the older days who played MMOs like Ultima Online and Star Wars Galaxies. Now, Star Wars Galaxies, to a certain extent, had factions. Like, there was a flagging system, not quite to the same extent. And there's some other games that had it. We're more for it. And then we have other people who are like, this game, I've immediately lost interest because I don't like the idea of PvP at any point. So
I haven't lost interest. I think it's something I haven't tried, because I haven't played any of those. When I started MMOs, those weren't the ones that I started with. So I think it'll be very difficult for me, but I think that will be quite enticing. And I feel like what they're doing with this alpha, they're doing a lot. They're bringing a lot to this, and it's. Oh wow, it's going to be exciting how it all comes together, and I like finding bugs, technical issues, because it means that they're working on it and they can fix it, and you can kind of help them shape their game. So this is nice. I like it.
All right. So we're going to move on through our mailbag, but we're going to make this pretty quick, obviously, because we are running low on time for this episode. It's longer than I thought it was going to be. Thank you, Thais, for
I knew it.
It is, obviously. I was actually going to say right at the beginning of the show, this is probably going to be a short episode. I should know better than ever say that, because on some of our other shows, whenever I say it's going to be a short episode, Arcaneer and I go for like 3 hours. So, we have 2 emails that I wanted to hit up, and one of them is from episode 17. We do mailbags from time to time. Mailbags will only really happen on this segment, because this is something that, is a little smaller and a little bit more, I'm trying to think of the word, warm, casual, I guess. I feel like we should, if I could get the tech in place, Thais and I would be sitting on a couch drinking tea, and eventually that will probably happen. But for now, we have to do it like this.
This is more friendly,
Yeah. So first off, this is from Aria Tross. He has emailed us several times in the past, and of course is also one of the first people always to comment on our forum postings and stuff like that. So thank you so much. We really do appreciate all your support for what we do here at From the Ashes, because it's really cool. And of course, if you want to send us your own email, head over to dungeoncrawlernetwork.com. There's a contact us button right at the top. You can click that and you can send us a message for this show. And we will get to it. We will get to it whenever we do one of these. So first off, he's talking about episode 17, where we talked about tavern games. Okay, like that was a stretch goal that was hit, and we were talking about various things that we were hoping to see within Ashes of Creation. So he says, and I'm going to try to paraphrase this and jump around, so I'm not going to read the entire email, but we're going to hit up a couple things. So first off, the problem with tavern games, if there is gambling in it. They mentioned Sinbad, who was on this episode from Vengeance, said, if there's a lottery in Eve that was mentioned by Telcar, he's Sons of the Seven. Most MMOs these days, they don't take it because they'd have to label their game as mature, with a lot of MMOs don't want. I believe countries like Australia have big issues with these things, which is actually true. By putting gambling, the ESRB would require this game probably to have a mature rating. I know Elder Scrolls Online fought to get a teen rating, but it ended up not doing a team rating anyway. And if you've ever played that game, there's some really dark stuff in there, which they've earned their mature rating, and eventually they embraced it. But yeah, I'm not sure if Australia does have issues with mature. I think they do, because I believe I've heard that in the past, but I think you can get it anyway. Thais, at any point in time, if I'm just going to jump through this, but if you want to say something, just speak up. As far as card games goes, would it be strange just to give players a deck and let them make their own? There are hundreds, if not thousands, of different card games that can be playable with just a normal deck of cards. Give players the tools just to do that? That was like a question. What are your thoughts on that one, Thais?
Oh my gosh, that is an astounding idea. Because there really are so many things. There could be people sitting around playing War or Speed, which I would love, and then they'd have to add gambling. That's a phenomenal idea. Now, trying to make that work, though, I think would be pretty difficult because it'd be open to so many different things. But just the idea itself is a phenomenal idea.
I do agree. That was something that we didn't think of. We thought of different card games, like ones in like Final Fantasy 14. Obviously, they had their triple triad, which is one of that came to mind. And then, of course, games like Gwent or Hearthstone that already exist within a certain amount of rules. But the idea of just giving someone base cards, that maybe are more lore specific. Well, I mean, a standard deck of cards here are pretty, diamonds, kings, queens. That's something that is pretty universal. Put some unique art on it, and there you go. You got cards. I'm just curious, like you said, how would the table work? Is it just something like I could literally just throw? Would it, have to be, how they design it would be interesting. But yeah, giving people cards, that's pretty cool. I know he mentioned at one point about bars and stuff like that, having a dart mini game and bowling and things like that. But I guess my issue with that is based on the server tech, whether or not they'd be able to pull off the idea of like a first-person shooter perspective to do darts. Here's an issue that I found. Spectating on arenas that we saw, he's like, don't make them instanced. Think WoW's Fight Club, a certain queue, but for teams, and let people bet on the outcomes. This way, arenas could make sense from a lore perspective too. Players could even be such massive bettors that they have their own gladiators whom they pay, which could create corruption, all of this being player driven. Just give them a system to accommodate it. That would be
a form of gambling, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, it's all player gambling. It's no different than any number of guilds who do lottery systems to try to encourage people to throw money in a guild bank.
But what I'm asking is, wouldn't that give it a mature rating if it was player to player?
No, because specifically on the bottom of games on online games, they say online interactions are not rated by the ESRB. So as long as there's not a system in the game that allows for betting, if it's just something like everyone says, okay, give money to so-and-so and they'll hand out the money, that is not a system in the game. Therefore, player interactions are not rated.
I like it. I like that idea. Then you'll have to find people who are actually trustworthy to handle your money.
Well, I know we talked about it in that episode about people running like lotteries and stuff in EVE Online, and there's been issues where people just ran off with the money. But, that game allowed you to retaliate because you could literally destroy everything they owned. So my issue with the spectator arena is, depending on how many people are really interested in it, and I know PvP, especially arenas, are big. The WoW Fight Club did have an issue, and that was the queue line. Because it was an instance, you walked into the Brawlers Club and you said, I want to fight. It's like, you're number 243 in line, and you just had to wait as people fought. And some of those fights, lasted a while. I mean, I've done arena fights in WoW that we ran the timer out. You know, like that kind of thing can happen. So could you imagine being 30th in line and it's a 15-minute, even if it's 15 minutes or 10 minutes or even 5 minutes cap on time for an arena, how long it would take you to get through? That's the issue I see.
But people who are interested in something like that would not mind making that wait. Now, obviously, if you're 200th, they might mind. But something like 20th, 40th, if you really want to participate, then they'll wait. Or come back when the line is shorter. That is it's really interesting, though. And I think that would really work, especially in a game like this.
Yeah. I mean, I like the idea. That was definitely something. It's fun to watch other people fight. But at the same time, it would almost like you would have to do a certain level of instancing, even if it was just, okay, you're creating a phase that has 20 people. So no more than 20 people could be in it. That way the lines were at least somewhat reasonable. Because I can tell you that if you did something like that with WoW's arenas, where hundreds, if not thousands of players are trying to get in at the exact same time, it would never happen. Like, it just would not happen. So, excuse me, I'm sorry. Kind of choking up here. So I'm skipping over a few more things in the sake of time. Arishas, thank you again so much for the email. Obviously, keep sending them in. Holiday events, because we mentioned those. They are always a good idea based on real holidays or not. They change things up. They change things up. That's always good. It feels like time passes, especially in a static world in World of Warcraft, for example. What about different races? Even here, there's one race, human, but different cultures have different festivities. Elves might have different holidays than humans and at different times. I do like the idea of holidays within game because it does break up some of the monotony. At the same time, though, Ashes of Creation, I don't think is going to have a super monotonous world, only for the fact that things can change. Your city can be destroyed, and therefore physical change can happen. Albeit, I do like the idea of holidays as you come in and it's Christmas time and there's a Christmas holiday or something along those lines, because it just kind of gets you in the mood, and I'm all for flavor.
I agree with you there. I would love to walk in my game where the seasons change, it's snowing and it's Christmas. That to me is just, or it's fall and it's Halloween. That I would enjoy seeing that, but I can see how that would be very confusing with how many different races there are and trying to accommodate everybody.
Nice. Yeah. And our next email, which is from our patron supporters, Monaco himself. This is on our or 2 episodes ago, from the Ashes, episode 19. Hello, Aggelos. I'm listening to episode 19, and I am so excited to hear you guys talking about the music in MMOs. My 2 cents, when it comes to a new game and what makes or breaks it, I think the music is number 2 on importance, while visuals being number 1. Think about how music can be manipulated to make you feel a certain way in different situations. I believe this guy they hired, which is Bear McCreary, to do this is going to put together a great score for this game, and I fully believe it will be amazing. Music to me is the easiest thing to get lost in any MMO and should be among the highest of priorities. I hope we get a taste of his work on the Ashes project so we can really get excited. I think you guys are right, though, that each zone or area should have a different theme or musical score. Also, I'm not sure if this was brought up, but how cool would it be if you are a ruler of a node and you could set the musical tone for your area so people could get a feeling of what type of place they were entering? Set up a dark musical score to show people you are a violent and evil ruler, or a very empirical type score so you could show a merciful and divine. Man, I tell you, I can get more and more excited about this game the more I hear about it on the interwebs and on your show. Keep up the good work. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, music is something that is really, really important. And I know some people say that, I think even in one of our channels, someone was like, I don't even play music, I play my own. I get it. Some people do that. But I always encourage people to listen to music the first time because that is what it's there for. It's to set a mood, set a theme. How many times have you seen something like, perfect example, any Game of Thrones episode, anytime there's a big speech going on, there's always a musical score playing in the background. And what's really funny is if you watch one of these epic speech moments, like Braveheart, for instance, when he does, his big speech, there's a little bit of music in the background. It sets the tone. If you've ever watched the behind the scenes when they were recording it and he's just giving the speech, you're sitting there going, the music really does set a tone and really get you that hyped up. I mean, for one of our other shows, I pretty much play a metal cover of the theme song because it gets me hyped up right before the show starts, puts me on a certain mental level that I want to be at, and I go forward. Thais, what about you?
Well, I will admit here that I used to be one of those people who played in silence, where I either played my own music or I played my games with no sound whatsoever because I enjoyed playing in silence. And only recently have I really played with the music, with my headset on, and it really is a completely different experience. And recently when I was playing Guild Wars 2, with you, and we were doing that big battle and the music was playing, it made it so much more involved, so much more epic. And it makes your heart race. It gives you goosebumps. And I definitely feel now that music is extremely important for setting the pace and the tone and the atmosphere of the area, because it matters. It really does.
And one of the things I know someone mentioned was that ambient music should almost be like on the fringe of hearing. So it's just enough to let you hear it. But a lot of scores have those big crescendos and stuff like that. One of the ideas I always thought about this is they should break the song into two parts. Maybe not on like the soundtrack, but like in the game. All right. So what you do is you set up the big musical score at the beginning, like when you first walk into a zone, right? And then what it's going to do is about halfway through, it's going to cut. And then you're going to hear it'll seamlessly go into the more mellow ambient. But instead of just restarting the track or shutting the track off completely, it only replays from that point of the cut where it's the soft ambient without restarting the big score again, unless you enter and leave the zone. I thought that was kind of interesting. Something I hope that MMO developers do. That way, the music, I know in some games it just stops or repeats completely. But then, of course, if it was something that has this big, crescendo in it or this big moment, and you're just sitting there rooting through your bags, it loses a lot of the punch. Yeah.
I also feel like ambient sounds are important. Like if you're in a swamp, you're hearing bullfrogs croak, you're hearing all those noises, birds. If you're in a forest, and those to me are also important. Now that I play with sound, like I think I just heard a bird in the distance, because it means that the world around you is living in this game. That's going to be important.
Absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of this From the Ashes episode and our Pillars of Creation segment. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much to my co-host for this evening, Thais. You are awesome, as always, and much appreciated. Definitely check out everything we do, dungeoncrawlernetwork.com. You can head over to all of our other sites, twitch.tv, YouTube, Patreon, all those things, which you'll see at the end of this video. Pretty easy. Dungeon Crawler Network, because that's where we are. We really appreciate it, and we hope to see you in Ashes of Creation. See you later, everybody.